started this channel, I started with, there were several arguments, meaning depending upon what I was talking about at any particular time. But one that kept coming up, that came up over and over again, had to do with Hillary Clinton and the handling of the investigation with her emails. I have a smiling Clinton in the background because, for the most part, my argument boiled down to that woman should be in prison. That sounds harsh, and that sounds, gruff. And I am not the person who tends to like to put people in prison or go on with that idea. I think we have far too many people in our prisons as is. But I say that stark terms because I kind of want to make this point that she got away with something that if it was anyone else, they would be under a jail right now. Do you remember this? It's funny, when I was thinking of how I was going to do this piece and how I was going to think about this piece, meaning how do you relay the information associated with whatever you're talking about, I kept thinking to myself, because the title of this was different at one point, that would you rather lose a friend than a fight? That thing popped into my head as I was writing stuff down or thinking through it. Would you rather lose a friend than a fight? Would you rather lose this person who you've known for God knows how long? Or would you rather be right? That's basically what it's getting down to. My wife would probably emphatically say that I personally would rather lose a friend, which maybe if you're just purely in an intellectual space with not things happening around you, you might say, yeah, well, lose the fight. The friend is more important. But for me, I would, in reality, I would probably lose the friend. And pursuant to that, yesterday, I fact-checked her mom, which kind of even makes that point more emphatic. But that said, on this particular case, I think my position is probably more right, even though everybody's telling me that it's wrong. Or mainstream media says that the position is wrong. I would even go so far as to say it's so right that it should be assumed, even though, again, people look at this position and walk away from it as if there's nothing to see here. I will recount this position to you, and I'm going to reveal more evidence to make the point that it is probably right. Do you remember this? This is former Attorney General Loretta Lynch. Feels like I got peanut butter in my mouth. Loretta Lynch was under Obama. She was Obama's Attorney General. She came in after Holder left. Listen to what she's saying here in relation to the case with the Clinton case.
The final determination as to how to proceed will be contained within the recommendations in the report in whatever format the team puts it together. That has not been resolved, whatever report they provide to me. There will be a review of their investigation. There will be a review of what they have found and determined to have happened and occurred, and there'll be their determinations as to how they feel that the case should proceed. I do think that no matter how I viewed it, I understand how people view it. And I think that because of that, and because of the fact that it has now cast a shadow over how this case may be perceived, no matter how it's resolved, it's important to talk about how it will be resolved. It's important to make it clear.
This is Loretta Lynch. Loretta Lynch in this case is essentially making this point of saying, look, I'm going to leave it up to the FBI and their determinations on how we proceed with the case. Now, why is Loretta Lynch saying this? Meaning, why is the FBI, why is the person who's head of the Justice Department, why is she saying this? Why is she looking into a camera and telling people that, look, it's going to be up to the FBI's determination on this? She's doing this in part because of my argument of malfeasance. I look at this and I go by incentives in this, and I think the incentives are pretty straightforward and clear on this. You have Hillary Clinton, who's running for the President of the United States. She was the Secretary of State of the current President of the United States. The Attorney General that was put in by the President of the United States. And no one within this motley crew of people want Clinton to be arrested. That's a flat fact. I don't think if you polled Loretta Lynch, Obama, any of them, all of them have every incentive of the world in making sure she is not put in prison. It casts a dark light on Obama, and let's be honest, Loretta Lynch is not going to get a job if Clinton isn't back in office. Not to mention, they're all, working for the Democratic Party in this case. And the last thing they want is Hillary Clinton prosecuted. That's a given. I guess that's the basis to which I look at this. And from there, I ascribe certain emotional incentives of what these people want and how they go up their objectives. Would a Democratic president maybe be hands off? Okay. But does the Attorney General not know that the president doesn't want Hillary Clinton arrested and locked up? Of course she knows that. Let's be honest. And Loretta Lynch doesn't want Clinton locked up either. Let's be honest. That same Loretta Lynch that we just talked about that doesn't want Clinton locked up is saying this because she wants to get across to people that just because the Democratic president put in the Attorney General and that the person who was the Secretary of State, there's no malfeasance here. We're not going to do anything. My hands are going to be off the wheel. You can trust me that I'm going to be off the wheel. Nothing to see here, folks. Because at the end of the day, Loretta Lynch was going to get the final determination on whether or not they were going to prosecute Clinton. But that's not true. Like what she said just there, that's not necessarily true. Her hands weren't off the wheel that we're finding out later on. I'm also getting a different view of Comey to some degree. And I guess my point is this. My point is, yes, they will intrude. It's nonsense to believe that this Attorney General would not do something in order to try to protect the Secretary of State. Now, how far they would go, we can debate about, but certainly within the margins of errors, or within the margins to which they could do something, they're probably going to do something to make sure she skates. It looks like it's gone beyond the margins of errors. Meaning, yeah, it might have been within her purview to do so, but what she just said here wasn't true. Also, I'm beginning to think that when Comey came out and did his shameful, here are all the sins that Hillary Clinton committed. Each of those sins, mind you, would get a person put under a prison. And I'm saying under a prison meaning they're going to be in there forever, for life. But after describing all of these errors, all of these failures, all of these things that would be crimes for any other person, for 99.999% of the population, he says no reasonable prosecutor would bring this case. Walks off stage. And it's like, what? You just recounted stuff that would get anybody else put in prison. And you're saying it is not even enough for an indictment or a case. That is nonsense. Now, I'm beginning to think that was a scream for help. That Comey says, look, here are all this stuff, but I can't do anything about it. What we find out is that Loretta Lynch was pushing Comey. Now, we knew she was pushing Comey in one sense already. We knew she was pushing Comey in the sense of Comey saying she wanted me to talk about this case like a matter. When it wasn't a matter, it was a criminal case. The FBI doesn't do matters. The FBI does criminal case. Lisa Page, the paramour of Peter Strzok. If you remember, Strzok and Page had a conversation where they were talking about an insurance policy in order to put a knife in Donald Trump, to make sure that even if he did win, that his presidency will essentially be marred by scandal, where they can kind of almost like this war of attrition, have him just bleeding out. Lisa Page had testimony, congressional testimony. So right here. Former FBI lawyer Lisa Page testified last year that officials in the Bureau, including the FBI Director James Comey, discussed the Espionage Act charges with Hillary Clinton, citing gross negligence, but the Justice Department shut them down. Justice Department run by one Miss Loretta Lynch, who said that she was going to accept what the FBI came up with in regards to charges. It seems like Loretta Lynch didn't have her hands off the wheel, and that they were pushing back on various items, and that the most that Comey could get across to the public was this cry for help, and this depraved thing of here are all her sins, but no, we can't do anything about her sins. And then this other weird cry for help where he's giving testimony saying they pushed me on it as a matter. The next question would be, was there anything else that the Justice Department was doing to try to inhibit you or get you to maybe deviate from a path that you were on, a line of thought that you were on? Meaning they wouldn't have came to the Attorney General or to the Justice Department if they didn't believe they had something to come to them on. And apparently they did. And apparently it was Comey with them, mind you, meaning Comey wasn't unaware of this. Comey knew exactly what was taking place. Shut them down. FBI wanted espionage charges. The Justice Department shut them down. The Justice Department by this woman, Loretta Lynch, who was under a Democratic president, on a case dealing with a Democrat running for president with an attorney general that was put there by that president, and will probably get a job by the next president, assuming that Hillary Clinton wins the election. But for her to win the election, she has to not get indicted and she has to not go to prison. I'm saying all of this was dodgy because everybody in this situation had a very basic want and had certain skills within the situation to affect that want. That want being, we don't want Hillary Clinton to go to prison. And Comey himself, who hated Donald Trump, or at the very least got to the point where he hated Donald Trump, thought that this was somewhat of a national emergency. But a person who thinks this is a national emergency and believes that the person to beat this national emergency needs to not be in prison to do so. Like, all of this looks a bit dodgy. And at the point where Comey acquiesces to this, Comey is stuck with this kind of, everybody has to kill a homeless guy, so we have dirt on somebody. Comey has dirt on himself in this case, because if Comey comes back and says, yes, I was being pressured, it looks horrible for Comey. Meaning, Comey comes to the Justice Department saying, we want charges. The Justice Department continuously turns them away. At least that's what Lisa Page is saying. I don't know why Lisa Page will lie like this. And this was verified by a representative from Texas, John Ratcliffe. John Ratcliffe puts out a tweet. Lisa Page confirmed to be under oath that the FBI was ordered by the Department of Justice, Obama's Department of Justice, not to consider charging Hillary Clinton with gross negligence in the handling of the classified information. Ratcliffe asked, so let me see if I can. I know, I'm testing your memory, but when you say that the advice you got from the department, you're making it sound like the department told you you're not going to charge gross negligence because we're the prosecutors and we're telling you we're not going to. Ms. Page, that is correct. That is correct. It's not that we didn't do our jobs. We tried to do our jobs. We weren't allowed to do our jobs by the political instrument of the Department of Justice. Just saying. Just saying. This should be a bombshell. Newly reached transcripts from Page's private testimony on the front of the Joint Task Force of the House Judiciary and Oversight Committees in July 2018 sheds new light on the internal discussions about the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. Mrs. Page told the committee that the FBI did not blow over gross negligence, responding to a question from John Ratcliffe, representative from Texas. Testified that the FBI, including Comey, believed Clinton may have committed gross negligence. We, in fact, the director, because on this face, it seemed like, well, maybe there's potential here for more to this to be charged. And we had multiple conversations with the Justice Department about charging gross negligence. Page further testified that the Department of Justice put a stop to it. The Justice Department assessment was that it was both constitutionally vague, so that they did not actually feel that they could permissibly bring the charge. The specific statute being referenced, 18 U.S. Code 793, deals in part with gross negligence and the handling of national defense information, which Clinton came under scrutiny for possibly violating. Will you or I have gotten that constitutionally vague benefit of the doubt? Would you and I have gotten that constitutionally vague benefit of the doubt? And not just would not have gotten that constitutionally vague benefit of the doubt. Is there something problematic here that the Attorney General, who may get a job from the president if she gets elected, who was appointed there by a Democratic president, who also doesn't want the Secretary of State to go to prison, is there a problem here when everybody in this wants her out? And with this kind of weird, legally vague, both constitutionally vague with that, saying, okay, the stuff that anybody else would not have gotten all of this, pushing back on the FBI for, she's going to get all of this benefit of the doubt, so much so that we're going to let her walk on a host of these things, on all of these charges, all of these failures, this recklessness with national information, with secret information. Everybody else gets a pass. Everybody else will go to prison. Hillary Clinton gets a complete pass. And what Lisa Page is saying is that the FBI was pushing for this, that Loretta Lynch, who said she was not going to involve herself in this, involved herself in this, or at the very least her department did. 15 minutes. God, that's too long. But you get my point. Hopefully you get my point. I'm going to put the articles at the bottom. I don't typically use the Washington Times, but John Radcliffe has verified that, yes, this is what took place. And not just verified, this is what took place. The transcript is there for you to read yourself. So I will leave this here. I'm not going to keep this one long. Let's see. Who's here? Who's here? H.A. was not right. He said over and over Clinton was going to jail. It's absurd. You know what's funny on this? I did think to myself, I was like, holy shit, H.A. was right. Technically, H.A. wasn't right. Hillary Clinton didn't go to jail, by whatever it means. Now, H.A. would argue, well, she would have went to jail if elements of the Obama administration didn't intrude on this case. And however you want to think they intruded, they did intrude on the margins. Loretta Lynch here, what she said was, she should have recused herself. And there should have been a special prosecutor doing this case in the same way they had the special prosecutor going after Comey. Why on earth would anybody trust that the Democratic president and the Democratic administration would do things to not have the person who's running as a Democrat not get locked up? I don't understand why that point of view is not right. All of the people involved in the situation say, there's nothing to see here. And so mainstream media says, well, hey, they said there's nothing to see here. And it's not like Democrats have the spine to really do something like this. This is more of a Republican thing. And I think therein lies the problem. If this was a Republican administration, the media would be more critical. They would be more inquisitive about this. They wouldn't take their word for it in the same way that they're taking everybody's word for it. Loretta Lynch meets with Bill Clinton on a tarmac. Bill Clinton says, we're just talking about our grandkids. Or Loretta Lynch, whatever. And the media says, well, they just said they were talking about their grandkids. It is true that this person will be the final determining factor in whether or not his wife gets put in prison. That's true. But their ethics and integrity is of such a degree that they can have that conversation without really talking about the case. And that it will also ensure that when they tell us that they were talking about their grandkids, that we will believe that they were talking about their grandkids. Why? Why would you believe any of this? Why don't you believe that the Democratic president who orders drone strikes wouldn't have the stones to say, or to appoint somebody who would make sure that that person doesn't get locked up? Why do you believe that the Attorney General, in her capacities as a Democrat, mind you, not do what she can to ensure that the person who's running for the Democratic nomination not get locked up? Why would elements of the FBI who are having these conversations about insurance policies dealing with Donald Trump, why would they not do something within the levers of their control to ensure that this person doesn't get locked up? Especially when you look at their opinion of Donald Trump voters and their opinion of Donald Trump. They thought it was a national emergency. We got to do something to prevent this national emergency. If you're in that headspace, why on earth wouldn't you believe they wouldn't do something to prevent what they would consider a national emergency? I guess it's just odd to me that this perspective wouldn't be assumed. That the people who are involved in this, who all have clear biases in regards to what they want to see impacted upon the world, not do anything within their levels of control to try to impact the world. That's bizarre. That's bizarre. But they say that perspective is too cynical. I don't think that perspective is cynical at all. I think that perspective is more right. And what Lisa Page is saying here is kind of making that point. Yes, it is more right. Because otherwise, Loretta Lynch wouldn't need to make this argument. And the argument that she's making here wouldn't necessarily need to be dishonest. Meaning, she wouldn't have to be dishonest here if she really was not dealing with the situation, or that the Justice Department wasn't actually impinging upon what the FBI wanted on this situation. Comey's recounting was a cry for help. him recounting Hillary Clinton's sins in the way that he did was a cry for help. Him saying this thing of, yeah, she's trying to force me to talk about the case like a matter. It wasn't a matter. It was a criminal investigation. Somebody could have been indicted, and somebody could have been perp walked and went to prison. That was a cry for help. Maybe. I don't know. I'm just saying it's a certain degree of comedy that you can recount somebody's sins in that way and then come away with saying there was nothing to see here, though. We're not going to prosecute. Not just we're not going to prosecute. No reasonable prosecutor would do it. And the mainstream media would hear everything that they just heard and turn away and say, well, Comey said there's nothing to see here, folks. What are you getting for dinner tomorrow? If this was a Republican administration doing this, they would have been paying a hell of a lot more attention. All right, I'm going to end this. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support for PayPal or Patreon. Let's see. And one more thing. Let me make sure I don't miss anything. I love that. H.A. never said she was going to jail. H.A. did say she was going to jail. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. All right. You guys have a good one. I'll see you in a few.